Hello and welcome back to the Ultra Films YouTube channel. My name is Dylan, and today we're going to be talking about episode 1 of Moon Knight, Goldfish Problems. We open up with the opening sequence of the show. We see the character Arthur Harrow. He is going to be the main villain of this show, and it opens up with the song Every Grain of Sand by Bob Dylan, and he's breaking a glass inside of a rag that he then pours into his sandals. Then he puts his sandals on. But this is kind of like a way to show that he's trying to repent for all of the bad that he's done by like constantly hurting himself, kind of in a way of self-torment, I guess, or making it to where he's judging himself so other people can't judge him, which I think is important for his character, because we'll get into it a little bit later, but he's ultimately the avatar for what is going to be the main villain on the God side of this show. And he starts walking around his little conglomerate and just starts talking to people. We don't see much of it. Then we open up with our main character, played by Oscar Isaac. He wakes up and he checks that like all his restraints are all together. He restrains himself because he has bad dreams, effectively. And then he ends up like sleepwalking. So he checks his restraints. He checks that like all of his precautions are still in place, just to make sure, like a peace of mind kind of thing, that he wasn't sleepwalking the night before, and any of the dreams that he had were just dreams. He goes over to his little fish that he has. It's a little goldfish. It has one missing fin. And I think he has that as a like way to tell himself that like everything is broken, but you can still live a life if you're broken. And it's like something that he's trying to take care of, just like a mental, like, I'm taking care of this thing, like I have to be good for this fish, essentially. And then he starts to leave his house. He calls his mom. He's talking to her. He leaves her a voicemail. And he ends up calling his mom a few times in this episode and never is actually able to actually reach her. I think his mom is not present. I don't think she wants to have anything to do with him, I would guess. We'll see more in the show if this is actually true or not. But I just believe that his mom is not going to be somebody that we ever talk to in the show. And if we do talk to her, if we do end up talking to her, I think it's going to be a surprise for some people. I think if we do talk to her, it won't be her, and it's going to be one of the other Egyptian gods. In particular, I think it's going to be Sebek, who is the crocodile god in the ancient Egyptian mythology, and just happens to be the father of Khonshu. Could be changed to be like the mother of Khonshu, who knows, because Marvel has been in the changing the sexual identity of a few people lately. So we'll see what goes on with that. That's just kind of like a little theory that I have. I don't know if it's going to be anywhere correct. It would be kind of interesting if they do bring that in. But again, we'll see. He actually gets on a bus and ends up being late for work. Steven, that is. He After he gets off the phone with his mom, he gets on a bus and he ends up being late for work because the bus showed up early. It doesn't really make sense to me, the fact that the bus shows up early, but then he's late to work. Um, but he gets to work and he's talking with his boss, who is like griping on him for being late. And he's like, "Yeah, I'm sorry, like so and so." And then he is like, "I actually have a like something to say about like the posters of the in Ed in Ed." Um, and he says that they're missing a couple of the Ennead. Uh, and this is kind of interesting that they would be not present. Um, I wonder if this has to do with like potentially something that's going on with like Thor: Love and Thunder, where we know that the uh, main villain of that show is supposed to be Gore the God Butcherer, um, or if it was just an oversight in the production of the posters in the show. I think it's probably an oversight in the production of the posters. They definitely did it on purpose. But the Ennead is a like super group essentially of 9 Egyptian gods. Interestingly enough, Marvel, when they did their Ennead, they actually left out a few and added a couple from the traditional Ennead. The traditional ones are Atom. He is a sun god. He's a god of pre-existence and post-existence. Shu is a god. Shu, they are a god of peace, love, or peace, lions, air, and wind. Tefnut, who is moisture, moist air, dew, and rain. Osiris is a fertility, agriculture, afterlife, the dead, resurrection, life, vegetation god. Isis is a god of the moon. And then, like, traditionally, as far as the Ennead is concerned, there is Geb, Nut, Set, and Nephesis. It seems like they left those ones out, as far as I can tell. We do get like a little bit of a sequence where Stephen is looking through a book of Ennead, and that's where we get some of these other ones. And in that book, when he is looking through it, we also see that they have Horus and Hathor in there. And then the total list that we have from Marvel's Ennead is Atom, Shu, Tefnut, Osiris, Isis, Horus, and Hathor. So we're missing 2. That could still be Geb and Nut, but again, it's weird that they left out some and added some. It could also be Set and Nephesis. We'll see if we actually get the whole list of who their Ennead are canonically for this. It's just interesting that they left some out and added some. And saying that, though, Horus is one that has been added a few times in other different cultures and stuff. So it's not like Horus is a weird one to have. It's just he's not traditionally part of the Ennead. But he tries to talk to his boss about this, and she's like, well, maybe they were left out because they were late to work and got fired. And so it was kind of like well, maybe you should shut up and get to work kind of thing. So he ends up getting to work, and he ends up realizing that he has a date with a lady named Dylan. And they're supposed to go to the fanciest steakhouse in town that Friday night. which is supposed to be the next day, essentially. This episode takes place on a Thursday. After he gets off work, though, he ends up talking to a street performer. And this street performer just kind of sits there and he talks. He's all painted in gold and he has his hand out like this, and he's trying to essentially just be like a living statue. This guy is painted all gold, and he is credited as Bertrand Crowley. In the comics for Moon Knight, Bertrand is a homeless man that works as an informant for Moon Knight. Ends up being like a really close ally of his, and just kind of doesn't necessarily do any crime fighting or anything with him, but he does give him information on like what's going on in the streets. After that, he tries to go to bed, or does go to bed, but he doesn't actually go to sleep. He is just kind of relaxing in bed, trying to stay awake. And they do this little montage of him laying in bed playing with a Rubik's Cube. Then he gets up and he reads a book and so on and so forth. And they have a overlay of him listening to a recording that says, trying to stay awake, try solving a puzzle. Puzzle's too boring, try reading a book and putting yourself inside of the story. And this is kind of an interesting thing to do as well, because Steven, as we find out, has multiple personalities. So like him trying to stay awake is trying to stop him from having one of these multiple personalities take over. At the time of this, he doesn't know that he has multiple personalities. He doesn't know that Mark, the second personality of his, is inside of his body. But he does end up accidentally falling asleep and waking up in the Alps. And he's got like a dislocated jaw. He like presumably just jumped out of a building. And he like stands up and he hears Khonshu's voice for the first time. And Khonshu's like, "Oh, the idiot is back." And he like reaches into his pocket and he pulls out this golden scarab. And he doesn't know what's going on, and he like turns around and he sees this guy like looking at him outside of a window, and he like waves at him, and then the dude like waves at him back, and then another guy jumps into the window and he goes, "What are you doing?" and starts like shooting a gun at him, and the other guy's like, "All right, yeah," and starts shooting his gun too. Steven ends up running while Khonshu is trying to like give him advice on like what to do, and runs into the village that's nearby, and ends up trying to blend into the crowd. And this is where we first officially see Arthur Harrow, but he like not officially see it because we did see him in the opening scene, but like a full body shot of him. Arthur Harrow is being played by Ethan Hawke, great actor. He's been great in the show, and he is doing like a little like sermon judgment thing inside the town square, where like he goes up and he starts talking to all the people of the town, and they one kid like runs up and he's like, I must know if I'm going to be judged or not. And Arthur judges him, and the kid ends up being fine. And then another lady's like, I want to be judged too. And then so like she goes up and she gets judged, and she ends up getting judged poorly. And she's like, but I haven't done anything bad in my life. And Arthur goes, it's not your fault, dear. It may be something that you do in your future. So we just kind of get like an idea of what this judgment is. It's kind of like a minority effect thing where Ahmet will judge somebody based off of all crimes throughout all time. So maybe she ends up doing something really bad. Maybe she wouldn't end up doing something really bad. Um, who knows? But it's kind of like one of those uh, like makes you think moments where it's like, well, is she evil, or is it just she has the ability to do something evil? Like, but she ends up getting judged for it and killed for it anyways. Um, and then that kind of like brings us into Amet. Amet is a demoness and a goddess in Egyptian lore. She is the three deadliest creatures in Africa, or at least in Egypt. I think overall just in Africa, but it's a lion front half with a hippo back half, and then the head, instead of it being a lion, like you still have the lion's mane, but you have a crocodile head. And that's what Amet is supposed to kind of represent and look like. Traditionally, Amet is a funeral deity, and her titles are the Devourer of Dead, the Eater of Hearts, and the Great Death. She isn't necessarily supposed to be a judgment god. She kind of works with some of the other judgment gods, but ultimately they pass the judgment, and then she ends up doing the death, or like the killing part, if there is going to be that part. And then I guess the way that they're kind of doing this is that she got tired of that role, and now she just decides that she's going to be the one that does the judging. And traditionally, she actually lives near the scales of justice in Duat. And that's kind of like why they got the connection to her being like a justice god. Like she lives near the scales of judgment, so, or scales of justice, or maybe not lives, but her tomb is supposed to be near the scales of justice, and so that's kind of why she has that connection beyond her actual role, where she does send out the justice that is supposed to be done. And after we have this little scene with Arthur, though, one of his men comes up and talks to him, and tells him that the scarab has been taken, so on and so forth. And he's like, "Is this person still here?" And the person's like, "I don't know. They probably are." So Arthur turns around to the crowd, and says something in Egyptian, and I believe it's supposed to be like bow or something. And everybody just bows in unison, and then Steven's standing there in the crowd, and he goes, "Oh buggers," and he like starts bowing as well. And then at this, Arthur sees it and calls him out and tells him to come forward. He does so, and when he's walking forward, Arthur is talking to him, and he's like, "Hey, you've stolen something from us." And Stephen's like, "Oh yeah, you mean this?" And he like pulls out the scarab and tries to hand it to him. And when Arthur goes to reach it out, his hand like Stephen's hand clasps around the scarab, subconsciously. Like he's not trying to let Arthur have it, but Stephen wants him to have it. So it's either Khonshu who is taking over Stephen's body in that moment, or it is Mark, his other personality, that he like subconsciously grabs control of the body just real quick there, despite Stephen still being in control of it. And Stephen ends up like trying to, "I'm not doing this," like he's trying to like actually give the scarab. And then a couple funny things happen, like he like rips his arm backwards, and then like he starts walking like a really weird walk back. And ends up like getting chased by some of these people, and Stephen's trying to give the scarab away, and it's like, don't hurt me, like and then he ends up blacking out while like this whole interaction happens, and he comes back real shortly afterwards, and we see 5 of Arthur Harrow's men just kind of like laying on the ground. They could be dead, they could be just be knocked out. But this kind of freaks Steven out, and he like, I didn't do it, and he like runs away. In this scene, I think what actually happens, because everybody has like this really weird look on their face after he comes back. I think there was a chance that Mark came into the body and turned into Moon Knight, because Mark is the Moon Knight entity. Turned into Moon Knight, like with full suit, which we didn't see, and then knocked out or killed these 5 guys, and then Steven came back and in that instant dropped the suit. I don't think, if it wasn't like this, we wouldn't have had all the reactions from the crowd. The crowd has a really weird shocked face on their faces, and I guess it could just be that like maybe somebody so skillfully like taking these people out in like such a short amount of time could shock them that bad. But I think it was that Mark suited up and then knocked out these 5 guys, or killed them, however it ends up happening, and then Steven regains control of the body, and by regaining control of the body makes the Moon Knight entity drop away. But he ends up running away. He gets into a truck that's like a delivery van for pastries, and starts driving through the Swiss Alps. And there's a big scene that happens. He blinks in and out of his consciousness a couple times. Ends up throwing a gun, and it harkens back to like the meme that's really popular, where he goes, "Random bullshit, go," and he like throws something. So I think that was supposed to be like a like callback to that meme, because they have been doing a few memey things with their shows lately, especially with like Spider-Man, with the 3 Spider-Mans where they all point at each other. So they're trying to incorporate some of the funnier memes in these franchises into their shows, and I think it's a good idea overall for them to be doing that, because people are like, "Oh, I know that meme," like, or "That's where that's from," kind of thing. It makes them feel more connected to it as well, I think. But after he ends up ultimately getting away from these men, through a series of happy accidents, I guess, he wakes back up in his flat, and he starts like feeding his goldfish, and he realizes that his goldfish is not the same one that he had. So he had a goldfish that was missing a fin, and now he's got one that is completely 100% real, correct. Has 2 fins, everything is good for him. So he ends up just running straight to the pet shop, and while at the pet shop, he is talking to the pet shop lady, and she's like, "Look, I told you yesterday that I don't sell defective fish, essentially," which like is like his first little like red flag, that like maybe something awkward is going on. And he like looks at the time, and he realizes that the time is like really late, and that he has his date that he has to go to. So he ends up like leaving, still wanting to figure out what happens with his fish, but he ultimately dropped that, and goes to the steakhouse. And at the steakhouse, he's sitting there for a while, and the maitre d' is like, "Hey, man, you still waiting on one more?" And he's like, "Yeah." And then Steven ends up calling Dylan, his date, and she goes, "Oh, now you call." And we find out that it has been 2 days since Steven had last basically controlled the body, and he missed his date with this Dylan girl, and he ends up having like a little bit of a breakdown, and he finds out that it's Sunday. So he missed 2 days total. and has a breakdown. He is traditionally a vegan, at least in the show's sense, and ends up eating a steak, and he doesn't know how to order it. He's like, "I'll have steak," and the maitre d's like, "Okay, what kind of, or I guess waiter, what kind of steak would you like?" And he's like, "The best kind." And the waiter's like, "Okay, so a filet, so on and so forth." And he's like, "Yeah, yep." And then so like the maitre d's like, "Okay, and how would you like it?" He's like, "Good. I would like it good." And the waiter's just like, "Okay, I will put that in as well done." It's really interesting because traditionally speaking, when somebody asks for like a good steak, like they're not really wanting it well done. A medium or something would be usually what somebody would be asking for when they want a good steak. But I think with Mark not really knowing how to order it, the waiter is just like, "Okay, I'm gonna give him a done steak." Like, but he then like ends up going home. And then tries to figure out kind of what actually happens. So he ends up going home and tries to find out what actually happened. And he's kind of like looking around his flat, and he sees that his table has been moved quite often. And so he like takes everything off his table because there was like scratches on the floor. So he moves everything off the table, and he's like stands up on top of it, and he sees like a piece of wood paneling in one of his like wall, and it's like just barely sticking out. So he like pushes it in, and he pulls it out, and he reaches in, and he finds a phone, and he finds like a locker room key or a storage room key. And he turns on the phone, and like right as he turns on the phone, he gets a phone call. He gets a call instantly, and it's Layla. Like while he's talking on the phone with her, Mark tells him to stop looking into things, and that everything will be okay. Layla gets kind of upset with him and is worried about him, and just ends up like hanging up on him. And then after that, we see Steven going back to work his next day, and while he's at work, we see Arthur Harrow come in again, and he kind of is talking to Steven, and starts talking to Steven about Amit and like her about her ideals, and he is like manipulating Steven in a way that like Steven like doesn't want to leave him while he's talking to him, and ends up trying to judge Steven. And because there's so much going on inside of Steven, like he's got Mark's personality, he's got Conchu like talking to him constantly now. We got Steven himself. Like Steven's like not a bad person at all. He tries to do really well. Like the scales that are represented on Arthur's arm as a tattoo are like all balancing, and they're shifting from like good, they're shifting to bad, they're like just kind of staying the same. There's no way to actually judge Steven. And in that moment, Arthur realizes that like there's too much things going inside of Steven, and that's why he's not able to basically judge him. So he lets him go, and ends up summoning a jackal to more or less attack Steven, scare him into giving the scarab. And Steven ends up running away from Arthur and goes, like, almost breaks a vase, runs into the bathroom, locks the door behind him, and like him and Mark end up having like a conversation where like Mark's like, I will save you, Steven. Let me have the body. Like, come on, like you're gonna be fine. Just let me save you. And like right as the bathroom door get busts open from this jackal, he finally lets Mark have the body, and Mark turns into full. First time we see it, full Moon Knight mode, and ends up just like smashing this jackal to death, and that's where we end the episode. I think it was a great first episode. Like, I love the fact that we were able to get like these couple different personalities. We see like one of them is like a more intrigue kind of character. The other one is like a more brute kind of character. Like it's a good like mix, and we get more of that in the upcoming episodes. Sorry about the abrupt stop. I found out that my video recorder stopped recording in the middle of editing, so that's why it seems like it's not complete. Anyways, I got pretty much everything that I wanted to say out of the way, so if you have any questions, feel free to ask them in the comments down below. Like, subscribe, do all those things. Check out other videos that we have here at the Ultrafilms YouTube channel, and hopefully you guys have a good day. Thank you. Bye.